Good afternoon and welcome on this Friday afternoon for what turns out to be a lively, hopefully turns out to be a lively Friday afternoon, because we are having a panel discussion on how research libraries in Europe are coping in this time of COVID-19. LIBER has set out a survey, and we are going to present the results and discuss them with a panel. And we have some very interesting panel members to discuss it with you, and we hope that you as participants will contribute to this discussion. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Hilde van Wijngaarden. I'm a member of the LIBER board, and I'm the director of the University Library of the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. First, Astrid Verheusen will take us through the results of the survey. We've had many responses to the survey, so this is really interesting to see how we're doing in Europe in our libraries at this time. And then we will, after that, turn to the panel members. First, a few practicalities. This webinar is being recorded, so everybody can look at it later if they couldn't be here today. And the slides will be on Zenodo. As many of you already know how this works, questions in the chat. We'll look at them during the presentations, and we'll see what happened if we'll see what's happening there, and look at when we will have time to discuss the questions, mostly at the end of all the presentations and the panel discussion. Our panel, I'd like to introduce this panel to you of this afternoon. First, Janice Vrij, she's the president of LIBER and director of the bibliotheek in Lausanne. We have Martina I'm from University of Utrecht Library, and she's also a member of the Emerging Leaders Group that has also been very active in discussing how we cope in these times. And Janice, also a fellow board member at the LIBER board and director of the library at the University of Patras. And we have two guests that can also reflect on what's happening here in Europe from their own experiences in their associations. There's Matt Greenhall, the Deputy Executive Director of Research Libraries UK, that he can reflect on what's happening from a perspective of the UK, and Melody Kennedy, who is here for her 6 o'clock in the morning, all the way from Berkeley in the US, and she's the Executive Director of the Association of Research Libraries in the US. So it's wonderful to have you all on this panel. And now we'll first start with the presentation of the results of the LIBER COVID-19 survey. Astrid, can I give the floor to you?
Yes, thank you, Hilda. So I will try to guide you quickly through the results of the LIBER COVID-19 survey. So LIBER launched this survey across its network on 19 October this year. The goal of the survey was twofold. First, to get a better grasp of the state of research libraries in Europe, and second, to understand how we can help our members. Both goals were specific to the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Participants got a lot of freedom in answering. No questions were mandatory. There were several multiple choice answers and many open-ended questions for additional comments. At first, the survey was sent to LIBER members only, but we decided to extend the invitation to any library professional who wanted to participate. Every voice matters, and the more information and diversity we have, the more realistic the results will be. What did we ask the participants? So the survey was contained 3 sections containing 32 questions. Section 1 and 2 were about the current situations in the fall of this year. And section 2 was about availability of services and materials. The third section was about what is needed by the LIBER libraries and how LIBER can support these needs. We have asked about all the issues that libraries are currently dealing with, what their main concerns are now and in the future. The questions focused on the situation in October and November this year, but we also asked what libraries think they will be dealing with in spring next year. So the survey has been open for 38 days and we have received almost 300 responses from 31 countries. The survey was completed by different types of libraries, but most of them were academic. In the category other libraries, there were, for example, municipal, school and public libraries. And with these responses, we have insightful data to share with you. The full report with all the questions and answers has been shared with the panel members to prepare for this afternoon. And a report with the results and conclusions will also be made available online next week on the LIBER website. For now, as an introduction to the panel discussion, I will share the most important results and conclusions. In the slides that follow, the results are not filtered in any way. The slides show the results from all countries and all types of libraries. As participants for some questions could give multiple answers, not all answers lead up to 100%. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's start. We asked what the main concerns were with the reopening of libraries. Although a majority stated that they are open already, participants' main concerns were the safety of their staff and users, and the possibility that the physical walls of libraries will be challenged. We asked if libraries saw an increase in digital services. The answers are quite diverse. So like 37% of participants answered that they indeed increased their digitization activities, while another 11% said they increased their digital services because before they could not offer them at all digitally. And yet another 23% said they are redesigning current services. We asked if there was an increase in acquisition of more digital materials and licenses and learning software. A little over half of the participants said yes to more digital materials. 39% said yes, more licenses, and 30% to more learning and teaching software. We asked if there were any difficulties with publishers regarding licenses and prices. And as you can see, 59% of the participants said that their relationships with publishers has remained the same. Only 15% said yes. Then we asked if there were any problems with the use of digital materials for remote purposes due to copyright restrictions. We were a little bit surprised that the majority of the participants said that there were no problems because we heard different noises about this in the network around us. We therefore believe that further research is needed on the topic of copyright. We ask if projects have been affected due to the crisis. Think about rebuildings, software development, etc. A majority said yes, negatively, so in a negative way, while also 16% said yes, in a positive way. We asked about the level of skills to provide digital services. We see again a very diverse response. About half indicate that employees are very competent, and the other half mention that their staff are not or less competent. We asked if more budget was needed to be spent on digital services or content. Well, almost half said yes, they did. The other half said that they didn't. And an important question about budget. Do libraries foresee any budget cuts? Here too, we see a diverse response. Half of the participants foresee or have already had budget cuts. The other half does not. We concluded with a question on the main concerns in general. And those main concerns were health and safety of staff, crisis management, organizational changes, and redefining the role for libraries. Then we started looking forward and asked what would be the main focus in a few months from now, say March 2021. Top answer was redefining of services, followed by training of staff on digital skills, then followed by reorganization of spaces, purchasing of digital materials, and redesigning digital library services. Negotiating with publishers got 23%. Then we asked what would most benefit libraries? What do they need? The top 3 answers to this question were to have more digital materials available, to have more training on how to do online research, and to have more space available to use materials. In relation to these needs, we asked what services LIBER could provide. As you can see, LIBER can do a lot. We can support online services and events to support open access and to cope with COVID-19. We can help to move towards complete digitization. We can support enforcing concerns to the European Parliament and with budgetary issues in the context of COVID-19 at a European level. And we could help with projects and protocols to cope with COVID-19. We asked specifically if LIBER could support with studies at a European level. A surprising majority answered with no thank you. We did, however, receive almost 40 suggestions about topics participants would like to have researched. And these topics included copyright, COVID-19, open access, open education, and artificial intelligence. For so far, the main results. The survey also contained many comments on the open questions. I won't be able to share those comments today, but some of these can be found in the report we are publishing next week. We have combined for now the results to the questions with some of the comments and reached some first conclusions from them. So first of all, there is a lot of diversity in the answers. Few questions had overwhelming and clear preferences. This probably indicates that each country and type of institution has its own special situation, and while conclusions to capture an overall sentiment are possible, it is necessary to examine cases more closely. There seems to be a lot of regional diversity, and although we could not present this well in the slides already, this diversity will be covered in the report. Health and safety of staff is one of the top concerns of the physical aspects of libraries, as well as reorganizing spaces. Dialogue is especially important now. Contact with users and peers is greatly missed by many participants. People need contact, the possibility to exchange ideas, and a way forward with these ideas. Digitization is on everyone's mind and agendas. Some of the comments spoke about a digital divide at this moment, and we need to be careful not to forget those who are behind. Some libraries have fully digitized and some have always been digital, but many are still in the process and at different stages or phases. What is certain is that libraries need to support in a transition to a full or almost full digital library. This comes in many shapes and forms, such as financial support, online services and activities, or tools and training. Also, there is a definite focus towards making more content online and more training online. Finally, we saw an almost existential quality to the comments in the survey, which could be caused by the shock the academic world has gone through, maybe even before the pandemic. There are new kinds of realities, and libraries, users, and other stakeholders need to be prepared to adapt. So, and with this, I thank you for listening. Last but not least, I would like to thank the members of the LIBER Executive Board who all gave their input with defining the questions of this survey. And I would also like to thank Stella Pahines, Interim Communication Manager at LIBER, who actually did most of the work on setting up and promoting the survey on these slides as well and on the final report. And with that, I give the floor back to Hilde and the panelists for the more interactive part of this session.
Thank you very much, Astrid. And also thank you for everybody that completed the survey. I hope some of you are in the audience as well. And it was wonderful to see all this input. I'm especially intrigued by this existentialist remark, Astrid. I know we don't have time, but is there something you can say about that that made me really curious about what to think of?
So yeah, that was reflected in the comments that were made. So a lot of participants on this survey were really reflecting on their role within their institutions, but also in general. And as I said, this was of course something that was already happening with the transformation to become digital, but I think the COVID pandemic has increased this questioning.
It comes up in this interesting world that we're living in. I think that there's also a question from Andrea Tatai about the country distribution. I do think that's important to briefly mention that. That will be in the report in full detail, of course.
Yes, that will be fully explained in the report. We had a majority of answers from Northwestern Europe and a little bit less from South and Eastern Europe. Yeah, but all those figures will be presented in the report.
Thank you. I want to invite our panelists to join our discussion. What we are going to do is that this survey with its results brings up a lot of topics that we would like to discuss further. As a panel, we've been discussing the results earlier this week, and we exchanged ideas that came up with each of us when looking at these results. And we came up with 5 topics that we thought would be interesting to address. Each panelist is first going to address one of these topics. The other panelists are going to react to that, but we also invite the audience to participate through the chat. And if we have time, then we can have those questions immediately or come back to them later. And first, I would like to invite Matt to share his first considerations based on the survey results. Matt.
Thank you very much. And can I first of all say what a pleasure it is to be here today looking at such a comprehensive and important survey on behalf of LIBER. And apologies for my camera, my internet is not stable, but hopefully you can all hear me fine. As Astrid highlighted within the survey results, the redefinition of library services to help both students and researchers came out as one of the top priorities that libraries expect to be dealing with and foresee for March of next year. The survey results clearly depict the considerable realignment of research library collections, services, and also the skills required to support these. And that there's a desire to sustain many of these changes, particularly around library services, not just through the period of the pandemic, but also beyond that period. So as a result of this, I just want to offer a few reflections. Firstly, that the redefinition of library services during the COVID-19 pandemic can really be seen to be both a pragmatic response to the pandemic, reflecting the need to rapidly realign services as the virus spread throughout Europe, particularly regarding the access to digital content and digital services to support online learning in particular. But also that what we're seeing here is a more fundamental redefinition of library services to reflect changing user needs and expectations over the medium to long term, now that we're coming to terms with the immediate impact and aftermath of the ongoing virus. So there are really two phases of redefinition that I think come out from the survey results, the immediate pragmatic and then this medium to longer term. Colleagues are considering how the pandemic provides an opportunity to fundamentally rethink our library services, who they're for and what they consist of, and how do we safeguard against future threats of similar pandemics as the one we've just witnessed. Now, a key facet of this, which Astrid has alluded to, is the digital shift occurring within our collections and operations. And this is well represented within the survey results that Astrid just presented, and is also of real interest to Research Libraries UK. The training of library staff and users in digital skills, the further acquisition of digital materials, and the reorganization of digital services are all identified as priorities. And that we can see COVID-19 has acted as both a catalyst for the redesign of many library services, but it's also led to new ones. So, for example, we've seen the sort of greatly enhanced provision of e-content and online learning and research interfaces, which existed previously but have taken on a new form, but also new and emerging modified services, such as those to support social distancing around click and collect, or scan and deliver, or curbside services, online customer service support. We've also seen something that we're particularly interested in our EKs around hybrid services. So the blending of physical and digital services, such as virtual search rooms and classrooms, and the breaking of interdependencies between digital and physical services. One thing we found is that many of our digital services and infrastructures depended on physical access to terminals or buildings. Quickly, to conclude my reflections, this digital shift and this realignment of library services will require a resource realignment, and we've seen this in the survey results of members, or a significant portion of respondents expecting to invest more heavily around digital services. This is being done at a time of budgetary restraint for many of our organisations and at a time of heightened user expectations. And this brings a real tension, particularly around things such as access to e-content, which I'm sure we'll discuss later. Finally, there are real issues around the digital divide, not only between our institutions, but between our users and our staff. 10%, for example, of the UK population does not have access to the internet. And this should be ever present in our minds, that digital doesn't always mean accessible. So those are a few of the items that I think I took from the survey, and would be very interested to hear what other panelists thought and colleagues within the audience.
Thank you very much, Matt. Janice, I was wondering, is this something that you recognize? You don't. You seem to have a bad connection, Janice. We don't hear you. Shall we first turn to somebody else in the panel?
Yes, yes. I think that it would be better.
Oh,
I think that it would be
yes.
better to move to another panelist, because most probably I need to, let's say, to
Okay.
re-enter. meeting to to the software here.
Okay,
Apologies.
okay. Good luck, good luck. Martina, do you want to react to what Matt was saying?
Yeah, I thank you, Matt, for your reflections, and I totally recognize all the things you said. I think we also discussed in the Emerging Leader Program group what the differences were all over Europe regarding redefining services, but mainly in the first place being shut down and had to start thinking of what can exactly we do during the pandemic. That was the first phase, of course. But what I realized was that the pandemic might also be an accelerator to show us a situation, what it can be when a world is completely digital or when we have to be digital, and what is left for the library, what kind of services can we do, but also how do we need to change the services to be able to adapt to that digital world. And yeah, so I totally disagree with that digital shift. I recognize a lot of things also in the vision of Research Libraries UK that you brought out earlier this year. And I really think that libraries should think about what can we do in this new world and how can we translate all the great things that we do to a digital age instead of focusing on the form that we've had for centuries, probably by lending out books and physical materials and being in our physical spaces. So yes, definitely a good reflection. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. And Jeanette, is something that you want to add?
Well, it was. There are very interesting aspects in this survey. Even if we had to really for LIBER to take care that there is not one situation in Europe. There are different kind of situations. It's especially remarkable in the field of the finances if you see that some countries budget cuts are an issue, but in others it is not. For others, it's not the most difficult part of this crisis. What I read in the survey is that research libraries in Europe are, of course, in need of financial stability, but are probably more in need of a clear vision how to go forward and where to go regarding the improvement of existing or creation of new digital services. So there is a focus needed because financial means are not more, of course, but especially because there are not more people. If I read the survey results, it's more a question of the people because we see in the results that people are quite skilled now, but still there is a lot of need for training. But it's not that you can have 50% more people tomorrow because you have to deal with more things.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So we will have most of people will still have quite a heavy situation in the months to come because as we have seen in the survey, also the projects, many projects are now stopped. So when they will depart again in 2021, people will have with the same means to keep managing the crisis, but still have to deal with the projects in plus. So we don't need more of the same. We need to have a clearer views on the most useful services and to be able to make them sustainable. So what I can see that LIBER can do to help the European Research Library. Of course, we can provide webinars. We have done this in the past. But it would have to be very, very well structured program in the field of open access, open science, open data. I think we have to focus also on on infrastructure, central infrastructure like European Open Science Cloud, a project that fortunately, thanks to huge engagement by many people in Europe, was kept on track even during the pandemic. Then there is a question of voicing the concern of research library toward the European Commission. We have done this in the past, so we'll continue to do this in the future. So for the attendees, if you have precise concerns you think that we should voice to the European Commission, just put it in the comments. Just now, it's one of the ways you can just voice your needs just now. One concern I can see is for sure the sustainability of these digital services, because we have seen that many people say, "Oh, yeah, we were able to go more digital," but there is an issue about sustainability, especially in countries where there will be budget cuts.
Shall we?
Yeah.
We were just reacting on the digital services part, and shall we move to other reactions and come back to the collective actions later?
Okay.
Okay. I would definitely like to hear Marilie's view on this shift to digital services. Is that happening in the US too, as well?
Yes, just briefly. Yes, absolutely. The libraries move rapidly to online support for online learning, and we're actually celebrated in many institutions for their ability to move more quickly than many others, and to supporting faculty as well as students. And so that actually led to sort of a stronger recognition within their communities for their values. So it is definitely a big shift. And then just quickly, ARL did a report, a series of reports on the role of research libraries with emerging technologies that was published. It's been published throughout the year. There was just so much information there. And that work really emphasized the expectation from the research community that research libraries would benefit by being more deeply involved with research data specifically, and involved, as Janice was talking about, in these more collaborative, sustainable efforts, because it's not something that anyone can do on their own. So there's definitely a huge shift to digital here.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. I'm seeing in the chats that Titia was struck by the response redefining the role for the library, even though that was a predefined answer. It struck us too, and Martina was thinking about that. Can you tell a little bit more about our reaction to that, Martina?
Yeah, well, I definitely was struck too by that, Titia, and well, if we're looking at the results, you could see a strong focus on digital materials, digitization, and even towards open access overall. And as we just discussed the topic of the need of redefining our services, then if the focus will be on acquiring digital materials and therefore building on digital collections, or even collections that in the future, in the further future, when open access becomes the norm, represent a significantly smaller part of the total scholarly output available, then the question arises, what does that mean for the role of the library and its position to a larger content? And Titia, as you mentioned really well, that 25% of the respondents of the survey mentioned that as a main concern for them and for their library. Now, what I think about this is that one of the things that I worry about, that the library is a very strong brand, and Mary Lee just said that there's so many research libraries transforming already. But if you ask anyone in the world what a library is, then you probably would get an answer something like, that's a beautiful building with books and it's a pleasant environment for studying and reading. So what happens if our collections are mainly digital, or not even our collections anymore, but openly available? Then how are we going to deal with that strong image when transforming our libraries and our services to a new digital world? And I really worry if the added value of the library is still be recognized. As research libraries, I think we face the challenge to hold and communicate a strong view of library values and the constant around the values that are constant around which the library is shaped. And how are we going to translate this to that new digital reality? I think we need to develop a better and shared understanding, not of what the library does, but why it is important to advocate for the added values the library provides. And I think it's mainly important if we want to keep a strong position in that academic field. And that's something I would be really interested to reflect on with the panelists, but also with the audience. So I'm really looking forward to your responses on this.
Who wants to react in the panel? Matt?
I'm happy to say.
Marilee, then. Yeah.
Marilee, do you want to?
No, Matt, just go,
So
go ahead.
I was nodding enthusiastically through all of those comments. You probably wasn't able to see, but I was nodding. I think I'd agree with all of those. And I think one of the things we've been keenly discussing amongst our UK colleagues is the perception of the library. And at the start of the pandemic, the association between the library and the library building and some of the messaging that our members were putting across within their institution, that the library building may be closed, but the library and its services are still open, and the strength of that digital offer. So how the experience of the pandemic has provided the opportunity to reboot the vision and the relationship between the library and its users, and to challenge some of those maybe long-held perceptions of what the library is and what it does and what it could be. I think going back to a point that Jeanette made was that there is a key issue around sustainability here, and that there is a role for individual institutions to be sort of challenging perceptions and providing a new vision of what the library might be, but there's a great consortial opportunity here as well, and a collective opportunity to fall behind those statements and that wider vision of what we are and what we might do. But I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'm hearing some noises. I'm hoping Janice will come in. Yeah, there he is. Hi.
So we just experienced, I mean, the failures and the limitations, of going everything, digital and remotely. I mean, this happened a lot, in our education system. So, I'm just a bright example of these limitations now. Apologies, many apologies to all of you.
No problem. We're talking about the new position of libraries and the image of the library, new image. And Marilee wanted to react on that as well.
Yeah, I think this actually just speaks to the importance role of leadership. It is really going to be critical that we can convene not only our own staff, but actually partner with our key decision makers and with our colleagues. And then in any of that revisioning, we really need to be able to put everything on the table and say, does this still make sense in this new way of doing research and learning? And sometimes that's a little scary, but it's actually really important to do, because everyone in our organizations and in the field is dealing with exactly the same thing. We're not in a unique role here. And so actually, I think this crisis is actually a huge opportunity to reset, as Matt so eloquently said, what is the perception of a research library? Because the fact that it is associated so predominantly with a building rather than the expertise and the talent and the people and the work that goes on in buildings and between institutions around the world. I mean, research libraries are very, very connected internationally. I think this is an opportunity to reset it, and that's going to depend on very strong leadership and on associations like LIBER.
So it's an opportunity as well as as a difficult situation at this time. Janice, do you want to react on the digital shift and the new position of libraries?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think especially in countries like Greece, in the southern part of Europe, it was very common that libraries had to address a lot of challenges with this digital shift. I mean, we don't have, this e-resources penetration like we have in other countries. The language is always a barrier. I mean, English. Okay, we can speak of English, but we do not perform our education, in a foreign language. So that was a major challenge, and how the library could help the students be introduced into this new kind of resources and new kind of services. And of course, we had, let's say, to combine forces, to join forces with other units in our university. That also helps, the role of the library, because somehow instantly everybody acknowledges that, look, here there are knowledgeable people who can help the university in a very difficult situation. More in our case, for instance, okay, people had a good understanding of what the library does, but they didn't expect that the library was so ready to go and support, the system entirely. As a consortium, as a library consortium here in Greece, we received compliments by the vice minister because we were so ready to provide electronic resources and to help the transition to the digital. So I think that yes, I'm not trying to be, let's say, either optimistic or very arrogant of what we are doing. I'm just being realistic, saying that sometimes we don't appreciate what we have already achieved, and what we have achieved, it's quite sustainable. Whereas in other units we could not see that. Was very viable, was readily available to everyone, and that was a key factor for the universities to respond to the challenge.
We also discussed preparing this session, the scholarly communication and the copyright issues that came up. Can you address that topic a little bit?
Yes, I would agree with Matt saying that the digital resources are not always accessible. Okay, and digital resources are not infinite. We don't have lots of resources. There's always a limitation. So the library, with the libraries closed, and with the unavailability of printed resources, inevitably we went to the realm of digital reproduction and making digital copies, asking people asking for digital copies for their education and so on. And that was not a local issue. That, as far as I understand, that was a global issue. And there we had major problems, because at some point the publishers and other agents in the publishing sector provided this kind of gratis access to research material, mainly, especially about COVID-19 and how they could support research to fight COVID-19. But as far as educational resources concerned, we had major limitations. And I think that here in Europe, we are all expecting the implementation of the digital single market guide directive, the new one, that will probably enable more universities to address this kind of issue. I think that this limited the range of our services, and at the end affected the delivery of this high-level education that the universities in the pre-COVID-19 used to offer. But also, I think that this openness of educational resources, the open educational resources, was a very bright example of what the scholars can do, and they can offer to their universities. And I think that now we have a very good example of what we, let's say, pursue in the next couple of years, how to increase this kind of open educational resources so that we are not attached to some absurd and irrational fluctuations that we see with ebook pricing, and with big deals, with big packages, with hundreds of books that perhaps they are not useful to everyone. So we don't want to replicate this crisis of journals in the realm of ebooks and textbooks and educational resources.
Yes, there's again another opportunity here as well. Mary Lee, I know that open educational resources are much more widespread in the US than they are in Europe. Are you in an advantage at this time?
I think that some of these challenges still really do exist. The open educational resources, I know particularly from my colleagues that we're working with in Canada, and I believe Matt's also working, is that there's still a lot of work to do to make these open educational resources available in usable ways. And there's also it also speaks to the need to be able to address the copyright issues in terms of other materials as well, not only advancing copyright to ensure that there's digital access that's openly available to others, but even to continue to educate, if you like, faculty and scholars who are using it to teach, that they don't always understand all the restrictions that are in place already. So we really have to do this on two fronts. But I know that open educational resources remains a top priority in the United States as well.
And I saw you nodding as well, Matt. Is that in the UK an issue at this time?
The open educational resources are a real interest within the UK, and this is similar across Europe. It's not as widespread as it is in the United States. So these are some of the conversations, and to benefit from some of the learning from our colleagues in North America, the United States and Canada about the use, because as we've been discussing, the cost of e-content and textbooks in particular is really unsustainable. So this is something that's generated a great deal of interest and a great deal of discussion within the UK, and to be looking at the use of open educational resources is something we're keen to explore.
There's a question about budget costs and how to manage them in the chat. Question from Nita. Is that something that you experience? Jeanette, you were already addressing the budget costs earlier.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see in the survey that some colleagues experience budget costs in this year, and probably there will be more next year. So I said that I think the only good thing to do in this case is to focus on what has a priority and to try to use common infrastructures that may be for free also in Europe, or not that expensive, to try to do the most important services, digital services. That's what I would see, because normally, if you develop for yourself, or this will be more expensive. So try to focus on common infrastructures and on the most important services, so to have it sustainable.
Thank you. Just moving on to the issue of ourselves, our work at libraries and our leadership in these times of crisis. Mary Lee, what are you thinking, what this means for the way that we manage our libraries?
Thank you for the opportunity to participate today. Really, this is a fascinating conversation. I think a few things that came out of the survey is, first of all, Jeanette really mentioned this, is it's really key right now. We're in a moment of, sort of going back and forth between being reactive and proactive. But I think in terms of leadership, it's really important for us to do these things together in parallel. So we have to be building the future together. And that's why leadership becomes key in building this shared vision with key constituents. And I think starting with what's changing in research and learning, and that really means being aligned with other colleagues in your institutions, as well as colleagues that can work on issues like sustainability together. So sustainability is impossible to do alone. You really have to do that together with others. And I just wanted to specifically raise a few examples where that are called out from the survey results, but also one that's sort of perhaps unique to where we are in the United States, which is the survey calls out a lot about the need for addressing health and wellness of the people in these organizations. At the same time, it's so important to develop cultures that are agile and flexible, because we're not clear yet where exactly we're going to end up. And as we learn more about what this balance or the new composition of physical and digital is going to be, we do have to develop cultures that are agile and flexible, and at the same time can maintain their wellness during a time which could go on for a few years, honestly, in my view, of change. So one thing is to deal with the wellness right now. I know in the United States, there's a big focus on making sure people, of course, are safe, but also that we're helping people address this isolation by work. People are working remotely. Some people really like that. Some people are very much in need of getting back together in their physical space. The other thing that's very important that was also raised was setting priorities. Whether you have a great budget or you have a steady budget for the next little while, or whether you're looking at cuts, the need to be able to demonstrate value for the work that you're doing is going to become very critical. So the investment in these priorities is going to be really up to leadership to make clear what those priorities are, and then to put the resources behind it, and then to advocate for those resources. And this includes investing in leadership development and professional development. This is actually a time when we need to do more of that, perhaps not even less, so that we can bring people with us. I know from the survey, it said that a large proportion of the respondents felt that their community was very knowledgeable about digital resources and the digital shift. And so it's continuing to develop that as well. The other thing that was raised is really working with your colleagues to imagine what space will look like as we move to a digital first service. This is very unique in every institution, and in your context, every country will have a different configuration possibly. So the question is, what will that look like? So helping people to work through that, to acknowledge it thanks to surveys like this, but to also then begin to work with your community to define what that was and what kinds of work need to be done. Again, I think where people need to work will be a big question. This is something that we've talked about in the United States, is does everyone really need to be in the same location when we get back to a more physically open space? Collectively, and I know we're going to come back to this if we have time, we're going to talk about how do we close policy and practice gaps. So we still have very challenging rights around digital first access, open educational resources. An example of that, digital resource sharing. So here there are very strict rules about copyright, and so having to, a lot of people ended up joining organizations like HathiTrust now. And in fact, organizations from outside the United States and Canada also joined to be able to provide digital access to of what were previously only physically available materials. And the digital divide is real, particularly for persons with disabilities, but also people who they don't have computers, they don't have great internet access, and they were counting on their libraries to do that. And the last thing I'll highlight here is just this dramatic change in research information infrastructure. We already had a huge issue with sustainability. Maybe we're a bit in denial about it, and maybe in Europe it's not as significant as it is here. But we do know that we're facing a financial constraints, and so we have to be leaders of people, but we also have to be very strategic leaders for long periods of time in terms of sustainable models, really looking in those economic models and building these strong relationships thanks to the European Open Science Cloud, there's actually a convergence happening around open science cloud around the world right now, with many other national agencies, and looks like this will be this CODATA's decadal program, which is really focused on research data management and other national initiatives. I think librarians really have to be involved in those conversations. They're not necessarily everywhere involved. And it's not that research data is the only thing we're worried about. It is the primary thing that many scholars are worried about. In the United States, this didn't come up in your survey, but in the United States, we're also dealing with heightened commitment to countering racism and advancing structural equity. In our own universities, a survey was done in 2016 that really showed that the vast majority of our population in research libraries is white, and that the further up you go in the organization, the less we see Black, Indigenous, and people of color engaged. This does not represent our communities. And so this question of diversity and inclusion has been become very much more stark in this climate, because the COVID has disproportionately impacted the BIPOC communities. And of course, we've had tremendous social unrest. So how do we live by our values of providing stewarding and providing access to a diverse and inclusive representation of knowledge? This is something that we're going to be focusing on, as well as creating cultures and organizations that really represent the communities that we live in.
Thank you so much. These are too many issues to discuss within 1 hour. That's very clear. Can we just go on for another 2 hours? Yes, is that okay? Well, maybe we can just get a little bit over time. Normally, I know that you all have this experience. You're in one meeting and right away in the other meeting, but I hope that most of you have some little bit of extra time this Friday afternoon. But does mean that I really want to get to the last topic. We don't want to skip, because Mary already said we're in this together, and we should keep everyone in this together, and that's really important. And I think libraries are in a wonderful position and are always collaborating a lot, nationally, locally, internationally. So it's up to us to keep that going, also help each other through this crisis. So looking at collective action, what can we do? What can LIBER do? Martina also is a part of the emerging leaders group in LIBER, and has also discussed what we can do together. So that's already one thing that LIBER already works on, to exchange ideas and help each other go through this. But Jeanette, maybe you want to start with a few remarks that we think LIBER can pick up in this time.
Well, we provided training in the past. We have a training program. As we have seen in the survey, people, in fact, are skilled, but still there are more skills wanted, especially because there are new infrastructures like a European Open Science Cloud coming up. So this is one example, but there are lots of new services that probably need also new kind of skills. That's how I read the results of the survey. So associations like LIBER, but also ARL, may provide also training for the librarians. The voices to voice the concerns of the research libraries towards the European Commission is something that we did in the past. Probably it will have to be done also in the future. When I see in the discussion and in the survey, this question of the sustainability is probably central, because there is a paradox on, in a way, we do digital most of the time in the form of projects. That's nice, but a project has a budget for some years, and afterwards you may have a new infrastructure and no money to continue. So this is really something that has to be considered when regarding the new digital services done by research libraries. This has really to go to have a certain kind of sustainability. Make open access sustainable is an issue. I think that we know about it, but still we have to voice that in a way. And what I can see is also in a way that perhaps we can do that when beginning with the in LIBER with the new strategy, the thinking about the new strategy. Is the question, and in a way positively challenge the role of the physical library. Here in Lausanne, it's also some kind very special because we did all these digital services, but on the same time, people rushed again in the physical space. We are absolutely full every day here in Lausanne because there is such a need, I think, for the students to be able to at some point to be on the campus, to be part of something. Sometimes I say, for the French speaking, we are the radeau de la méduse of the campus. So it's the ways people can experience to be part of a campus. And I think there is a role for this physical library in the future. We have discussed that this question arises: what exactly is the role of the research library in the future? And this is something I pretty much look forward to discuss in hopefully a very inclusive way, as situations are diverse in Europe with LIBER members throughout Europe. What exactly is the role of the library, not only the digital library, but also the physical library in the future?
These are definitely some things that we shall work on during the future. Also, working a little bit towards wrapping up, looking ahead, looking forward, what do you think that we're going to take with us as positive things or as things that we never want to do again? Any comments on that? Janice?
I'm here. So yes, what we should take back home. I think we should take back home that nothing is granted, nothing is certain, and that we should be, as you said before, we should be very flexible, very agile, very, let's say, forward thinkers, and to foresee the challenges. It might sound a little bit ominous, but I guess that we will face similar challenges in the near future for many reasons. Climate change is one of these, and especially in countries that like in Greece, that face the consequences of, for instance, the refugee crisis, and then you have populations that you need to serve, that you need to educate, that you need to enable them in every kind of way. Then obviously this will affect the role of the library. Now, I will go back to my main answer. LIBER in the Open Science Roadmap and in the strategy has set a name of this cultural change. This cultural change, I will translate that not just to financial sustainability, but also for institutional sustainability. How we make those changes that will be embedded in our institutions and that will be there for a very long time. So I think that finance is one thing, very, very crucial, of course. But the other thing is how the library and the leadership of the library can forward, those innovations and those interventions that can shape a new kind of system. And I think that the role of LIBER, the role of other associations, and the way that we co-work together, that we have those networks, is the very, very essential part for this to happen. Because I think I said that, last week when we had another a meeting with other colleagues. The one who knows things like advanced libraries across Europe, and most probably the northern, western libraries are more advanced on many matters than southern, eastern, have the responsibility to share good practices. Now, when we learn from you, the northern, western, then we have the commitment. I mean, sharing is for us is, I mean, the commitment to practice what we have learned from more advanced libraries and then make the changes. So this networking is very, very vital, and I think that this is a key message to take back home.
Thank you, Astrid. What will you take with you to the future with LIBER?
All of it, but most important, Hilde and I, you and I worked at a very rich library almost 20 years ago, and we were at the start of a digital transformation. And even if we had all the resources of the world, it was still about setting priorities and leadership. And also now again in this crisis, I think it's still these are still two very important aspects. So setting priorities and leadership, and of course working together.
And I wanted to give every panelist a last chance to say something, but just leave it at this. I think this is a very nice ending to this session, and also prevent people from just gradually moving out because they run out of time, and just going out like a candle. That's the saying, I think. And we've heard a few very interesting observations about where we are right now as libraries, the important position that we have to take everyone along with the open information, to work together to have not just the people at our library, but also our users, our students, our teachers, our general public in our country, to provide them with the information as good as we can, and work together to achieve that. I want to thank our panelists for joining us. I see the sun coming up behind Mary Lee, so your day is still starting. Thank you so much for traveling digitally to us and joining our sessions. And I hope I will speak to all of you again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.